Jackie, do you want to put maybe put that site that's there in the chat as well? That's on that first slide.
Mm-hmm. Oops. Sorry. I don't know if I can grab it.
I was going to say
I got it. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Just waiting for my chat bar has disappeared for a second.
So everybody looks like they're muted right now. We will ask people to stay muted unless you have something to share, you have a question. Video is up to you. We do like to see your faces, but we understand sometimes with bandwidth and things like that, people have different circumstances that might be going on. If you're, it looks like some of you though are maybe either in home offices or maybe at school. So, but feel free if you want to turn your cameras on. We do like to see your faces. So, can you advance us, Jackie?
I can do that part. Yes. My
So I think we have everybody hopefully can then also open up the chat window and the participants window. And if you'll go to the next slide, Jackie, just want to make sure that everyone knows what this should look like on your screen. So the window that will be right in front of you would be the slideshow, and then you would have the participant window just above that, and then the chat window open below. So, all right, Elizabeth says there's no link showing up in the chat box. You may have joined after I published the one link. So we will put that, I will put that back in. Thank you for that feedback.
I can add it right there. So there's both links.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, your chat box only shows the links that were there when you joined. So if I posted it previously, you're right, you wouldn't have seen that. So go ahead, Jackie, to the next slide then. So I'm Lindsay Slater from the State Support Team, and joining me today is Jackie Dietrich. And we are, like I said, going to share a little bit of information about Tier 2 phonological awareness today. So we welcome you, and we're excited to be here this morning. We have a nice group, and we're looking forward to learning and talking today. So just remember, our website is here. We also are on Twitter, so if you're a person who tweets, use the hashtag SST3. Our website has all of our professional development offerings, and that Google site that Jackie put in the chat earlier also is where all of our, not just Haggerty resources are linked, but many other literacy resources. We have resource pages for all the big 5 of literacy. And so just know that that's a go-to resource for you if you want some additional information. The recording of this session will also be available at that Google Sites link once we have concluded for today. So I think I talked a little bit through this, but just remember that the chat box is open to all participants, and Jackie and I will do our best to monitor that. We talked about muting the microphone, but at times we may ask you to unmute, especially if you put something in the chat and we want you to ask your question out loud because it might be beneficial to other folks. So just know that, and that's why if your name doesn't reflect your name within, and I think everyone's does, I see that Nikita, there's also two Nikita Browns. So if the person who may be logged in is not changing that name so that we know who's here. And if you have questions, like I said, you're welcome to use the chat box. We're a small group. You also can unmute and feel free to ask. And we are going to record this session so you can reference it later. So we're going to get started with a little bit of retrieval practice. And I don't know how many of you joined us for the first session in the spring when we had many participants on when we talked about Tier 1 phonological awareness, and we specifically went into the Haggerty program. So I know some of you might have been there for that, but we wanted to share just a little bit of retrieval practice with you because we know that that is important when we are using elements of explicit instruction in our instruction. And so we have just a few statements, and what we're going to do is, can everyone locate the reactions button that is at the bottom of their control bar in Zoom? And if you can locate that reactions button, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. You'll see if you have the panel open for being able to see. I see Sue, I see Jerry's got one, Elizabeth, good, Nikita, good. So it looks like people are able to access that.
Yeah.
So what we would like to do is you're going to use that button. If the response to the statement is true or it's yes, then you're going to give me a thumbs up. If the response is no, then you would just not do anything with that reactions button. So the first statement, I'm going to put that one up there, Jackie.
Yep.
Is phonological awareness is a skill that allows kids to recognize and work with the sounds of spoken language. So I see some thumbs up. And yes, that is a thumbs up response. So good job, everyone.
Yes.
The next one is phonological awareness is the foundation for learning to read. Oh, I see lots of thumbs up for this one. You're absolutely right. Good job. The next one is PA, and when we say PA, it's phonological awareness, should be taught in core instruction in only kindergarten and first grade. I am not seeing any reactions. Good job, everyone. The next one is lessons should be contained to 10 to 15 minutes maximum. Yeah, there's all the thumbs up. Excellent, everyone. And the last one is if a student is a struggling reader past third grade, interventions should focus on comprehension and fluency. Yeah, so that one's kind of tricky because you could have some intervention focus on that, but that would certainly not be the only thing that we would want to focus on, because usually if students are struggling readers past third grade, they often have some foundational skill gaps that we would need to address. So you might have some things there, but you definitely would not want to live there, and you'd want to definitely do some diagnostic work to explore further. So well done, everyone, with that. So if we move then on to the next one. So really at the end of this session today, we want you to be comfortable with administering and interpreting the past assessment so that you can identify specific student phonemic awareness needs. We also are going to be focused on thinking about how you could begin to design Tier 2 instructional plans so that you could address small group or individual student needs. And then the last piece is really to begin thinking about how you might progress monitor students and what methods and strategies you would use for that, because we know for administering intervention that we need to also see if the students are responding to that intervention. So this is going to be our focus for today. We are going to do we did a little bit of retrieval practice. We're going to do just a little bit of review that Jackie's going to go through now, thinking again about our theoretical frameworks and foundations for literacy in the state of Ohio. And then we're going to learn more about that past. So,
Yeah. So let's get started. So this is one thing that we like to start with all the time, because this is the way that we ground our work in Ohio. This is the strategic plan, which is called Each Child, Our Future. And while the literacy is the foundation, there's 4 domains. So you can see the 4 learning domains over here on the left-hand side in that mustard color. So we're talking about those foundational knowledge and skills, the well-rounded content, leadership and reasoning, and social emotional learning. So, but we also want to talk about these 10 priorities strategies at the bottom. And you see number 9 is development of literacy skills. So it all builds into where we're headed and how we focus our work in literacy. So this Each Child, Our Future is really important and grounds everything that we do in literacy in Ohio. So we're also talking about Ohio's plan to raise literacy achievement. And this is available on ODE's site all the time. So if you haven't taken a look at Ohio's plan to raise literacy achievement, we would suggest that you take a look at this plan. There's so many good components that are listed in here that we should all be familiar with. And one of those significant components is the simple view of reading, which is here at the top, and you see it's a multiplication problem. We talk about this in every one of our professional developments. We want to bring this to people's attention, but we also want to let you know that just because it's called the simple view of reading doesn't mean it's simple. Louisa Moats has said often, reading is rocket science. And so it is about the science of reading. This is just the simplified form to let you know that we can't get to reading comprehension. We can't get to having built skilled readers without each of these components. So word recognition and language comprehension are equally as important. And when you take a look at this continuum here, this is exactly what we were talking about in that retrieval practice. That even if you have someone who's adolescent aged, we're talking about this continuum, and you could have someone of an older age, middle school or high school, that's really working here in these early language and literacy skills. So we need to be able to assess and diagnose where they're at along this continuum and help them to move forward from there. They're never too old to get phonemic awareness skills. So after taking a look at that simple view of reading, we take a look at Scarborough's rope. So this really breaks down those 2 components, that word recognition and the language comprehension, into each strand of the rope. And you see phonemic awareness is one of those strands. Well, we know that as you build those strands together, as we braid together the word recognition skills in order to get a strong rope here at the bottom and a solid foundation, we need students to increase their automaticity. And if we were missing this strand, the rope would be weak. So we want to make sure that we build in this critical component of code-based word recognition skills, and that's a critical piece of this speech to print that we're teaching the students how to become these skilled readers. So we often also talk about the changing emphasis of the big ideas. So I know that you all are familiar with these 5 components over here on the left: the phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. But what we want to draw your attention to is these darker blue boxes. Those boxes indicate where we should spend more time at each grade level. So you notice phonemic awareness doesn't drop off. It's just a change in emphasis. So in K1, there's a heavy emphasis on blending and segmenting. But as we get through middle 1st grade and all the way up through 5th grade, we need to be changing that emphasis to those more complex phonemic awareness skills, that addition and deletion and substitution. So this just indicates to us that all 5 components should be taught consistently throughout the grades in Tier 1. Tier 2 interventions, which is what we're talking about today, are added on top. So we don't ever give up any of these things that are listed here, but we add to and provide more time in any one of the literacy areas where students need targeted support in addition to what they're getting in that solid tier 1 core instruction. So what does the research say? So we always ground our work in research and science of reading. So it's pretty clear about what the research says about phonemic awareness instruction. And Anita Archer, if you're familiar with Anita Archer and the explicit instruction model, we're going to use that right here with this slide. So if you could read with me, and where you see the bolded words, we want you to, that's where we want you to read along. I'm going to read the rest of it, but if you could chime in on the bolded words. And if you are familiar with it, if you press your space bar, you can temporarily unmute. So let's get started. What the research says. Phonemic awareness instruction
increases
reading and spelling achievement among
preschool,
primary
grade children,
and students with
learning disabilities.
So in other words, phonemic awareness is really important for all students to have access to this explicit instruction. So if we take a quick look at the phonological awareness umbrella of skills, we can see that we break this down into 3 categories. So early phonological awareness skills, basic, and advanced. So those who are using the Haggerty model, the Haggerty curriculum, they have, each lesson is broken up into 10 skills, and it goes along from simple to more complex every time. But if you're not using Haggerty and you're either using a curriculum or you are building your own phonological awareness lessons, to include all of these skills in each lesson helps to increase the student knowledge. So David Kilpatrick, who is really steeped in the research with phonological awareness, and we will talk about his past assessment as we go through today's professional learning. He says that we should not assume that students can complete these basic tasks until we know they have mastered them. Mastery means that they are automatic. So without any assistance, without manipulatives or visuals, they're doing it 100% orally. So we don't want to underestimate any of these skills, even if readers are gifted. We know that they need to build to the automatic level these phonological awareness skills that are listed here. We also wanted to call to your attention, this is another way to look at this. This is the continuum of phonological awareness skills. So we like this visual because it shows the staircase and how these skills build up the staircase all the way to those more complex skills of deletion, addition, and substitution of phonemes. But the 95% group is something that you can go to online. They are a great resource for lots of things literacy related. They base all of their materials in the science of reading, in the research. So if you're looking for great resources or articles to read to increase your knowledge base around the science of reading and all of the research, 95% group is a great way to start. And you can see Lindsay put that in the chat. She put a link to the 95% group.
Can I just add in one thing too, Jackie?
Yes.
We discovered as we were on there recently looking for these continuums, because we visit the site frequently, but they have a lot of materials and some of their sample lessons that are free right now because of the current situation with being, you know, in schools going remote and things like that. So again, as Jackie was saying, if you were looking for resources of how to structure lessons, they have some awesome samples, both for phonemic awareness and for phonics. I know we're not talking about that today, but I just wanted to put a plug out that you might want to take a look. I believe it's under their at-home resources, which the lessons are geared toward families. However, you could absolutely use them, you know, as educators. So, and I also wanted to say I love the reason that they're named the 95% group is because they believe that really that's how many students we should be able to get reading at grade level every single year. So
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay. That's really important. So it's resources like this that we want to make sure that we put out there and suggest, because when you go and you find something online, you're not sure if that's really steeped in the research and the science, but you always know, taking a look at something like the 95% group, that you're going to find quality resources, suggestions, and materials. So that's really important. So let's try Anita Archer's explicit instruction again. So chime in for the bolded words. We also know that, let's unmute, the lack of phonemic awareness is the most powerful determinant
of the
likelihood of
failure
failure
to
to read. So this means it is so absolutely critical that we build these skills in students in Tier 1 instruction. And then we go back for those students that we need to intervene with, the students who most need those gaps filled in. Maybe they didn't get it at all because phonemic awareness is not something that we've used in the past as a solid practice. So for some people, this is fairly new. So the fact that we're trying to build this in now, it means that we might need to go back for a whole bunch of students and fill this in. So if you take a look at, as we're talking about phonological awareness, and we look through the lens of a multi-tiered system of support, or MTSS. So this graphic right here on the right-hand side shows how you have that core instruction as your solid base. And then we build up to that supplemental support and intensive support. So we have to diagnose what the issues are with students before we prescribe something. So what do we really mean when we're saying diagnose before we prescribe? Just like in that retrieval practice where we talked about, so older students might need comprehension and fluency interventions. But we don't know that until we really assess and diagnose. So we don't want to have this Oprah effect where we're just handing out interventions to everyone. We need to know who needs which specific interventions at Tier 2 and who needs intensive supports in Tier 3. Because it's not effective if we take all of this time and provide interventions for everyone when what we really need is solid core instruction, and then to supplement for some, and then that intensive support for others. Teaching all students, we need to make sure that we have that solid base before we just start handing out interventions. So if the majority of your students are not at benchmark, then we don't hand out interventions to the majority of students. We figure out how to build that deficit into core instruction. And oftentimes we talk about decision rules, and if your school or your district has decision rules, those can help guide your interventions as well. So taking a look at phonemic awareness instruction at all 3 tiers, this is another way to take a look at it. So we have that core instruction on the bottom. So it's each and every student. Phonemic awareness is no more than 15 minutes a day. As we get into tier 2 and tier 3, we address the needs of small group. What we're going to do is recommend that we identify students with a universal screener. So that would be something like Ames Web or Acadience or Dibbles, using that universal screener first, and then catching the kids who are, it's often in those assessments, it's often color coded. So if we have a green, a yellow, and a red, then we would catch those students who are yellow and red. So they're either behind or far behind. So they're either, it would identify them as below benchmark or far below benchmark. But we also want to look at those students who are at the lower end of okay. So if you have students who are coming out as green, or they look like they're meeting benchmark, but they're really low in that benchmark, we might want to target some skills too, so they don't end up further behind as we go through the school year and go through our core instruction. So it's that universal screener. We want to teach, we want students to learn, we need to assess and make sure that they're doing well with those things. It gives us this additional information. And then we're going to go into and we're going to talk about, once we provide a universal screener, then on top of that, being able to dig down deep into those additional, into those more complex phonological skills. So if we dig deep with a diagnostic tool, like the PAST that we're going to go through, from David Kilpatrick, that really will help us target the individual phonemic awareness skills that need to be targeted for students after we give that universal screener. So that might just tell us that they're low in phonemic awareness or phonological awareness skills. But then how do you dig down deep and know which ones to really target? And that is going to be through that diagnostic that we're going to talk about.
Jackie, we have a question, and
Yeah.
Candace is in here
I
as
didn't
well.
see it.
So this might be something too you want to weigh in on, but it's from Nikita, and it says, for preschool students, at what point do you decide to do interventions?
Oh, good question. So intervention skills, so because pre-K doesn't have that same universal screener. So those universal screeners of Acadience and Dibbles, those really start at the kindergarten level. So we really want to make sure that you have that core instruction with students at pre-K. And so I know Haggerty has the pre-K curriculum, and many pre-K teachers are using Haggerty as their core curriculum. But if you are thinking that students are maybe not getting it or falling behind in those skills as you're moving along, you can work with the students in small groups and one-on-one to kind of help build those skills up. But pre-K is really that time and that place to build that solid knowledge of phonological awareness skills. So we're not necessarily going to dig down and provide them with multiple assessments, but you can do some progress monitoring with their phonological awareness skills just by bringing them into a small group and doing a lesson and listening for what skills they're able to recall, where are they chiming in, are they able to rhyme, are they hearing those sounds that are appropriate at that pre-K level, and really working on that in core instruction and differentiating that instruction into small groups as well. Lindsay, do you have more to add to that question?
Well, Candace just chimed in. I don't know if Candace wants to unmute, but she just said that the ELA can also give some skill strengths so that teachers would know where the students are with that. And I would just reiterate too, we know that we're building the foundation. And so just getting in those everyday tier 1 skills is critically important at the pre-K level. Because it's very typical for all students to be learning those skills at that age. So,
absolutely. And the ELA is a formative assessment, so you can give that repeatedly throughout the year if you see what skills you're targeting. But we're going to have a lot of kids coming into preschool with various backgrounds and various skill levels. So giving that overall rounded beginning where they're hearing the sounds. We're not going to go by letter of the week. We're going to look at research-based practices that talk about what's letters and letter sound correspondences may be the easiest, starting with kids' names, the first letter in their names, their friends' names, their family letter names. Like both Jackie and Lindsay were saying, that we want to start with that rhyming and with clapping and various things like that. And then using that ELA, which is required, some of them have to be turned into EMIS for recording, but you can use it in between those periods of time. You can use it weekly if you need to. You can target just some of the skill sets that you need to take a look at, or you can target the entire series. So that's a really good place to start.
the other thing that I might add in particular when you're thinking about preschool students, certainly it goes in the early elementary grades as well, but my background as a speech language pathologist, you would absolutely want to make sure that you were reinforcing the students being able to hear those sounds and then say them as well. And so that's another piece that if you had students that were having great difficulty in being able to say certain phonemes that are completely age appropriate for them in preschool, then there would absolutely need to be some consideration for intervention. But it might be you would be playing with sounds, but it also, involving your SLP and those things as well. So that would be another red flag for me if children weren't producing sounds and being able to, manipulate or call back to you as you were doing some of the phonemic awareness activities. So just another thing to keep in mind.
The last point that
just a second, Candace. Nikita, did you have anything to add, or did you want to unmute and ask any other questions?
Not really at this point. I know, well, I do have another question actually.
Yeah.
Candace, I believe, mentioned, and we know for best practices, when you're teaching letters, you start with, the beginning letter of the children's names. However, we're in situations where we're following one curriculum that has one letter sequence based on their research, and then we're doing handwriting with tears, which has a different letter sequence because you're focusing on the developmental when it comes to writing letters, that developmental stage and which lines are easier to make. So just sometimes it gets confusing as to which sequence should I follow,
Absolutely, and a lot of the curriculums are going to be written different ways. I would just suggest taking a look at your curriculum, making sure that it's research-based and finding that research base behind of it. The other thing that I did want to mention though is that a lot of times we talk about teaching kids phonemic awareness, and we often say in phonological awareness, and we often say that that can be done without any visual support. And what research tells us now is that's not necessarily true, because we want the kids to see you enunciating. We want them to watch the way you form letters, so that confusion, and you may need to help them to form those letters and those sounds, sounds from the right areas as they begin to manipulate that and learn those sounds and those repetitions. But I would definitely take a look at the curriculum. Just because we have one doesn't necessarily mean that it's based and grounded in research. And there are a few that specifically are research-based that say these are the letters that perhaps we should start with and a type of sequence we may follow, but that's going to be a district decision or a program decision. So just looking carefully.
So we have a few other questions coming in about just really, so what are we going to do with intervention? So I want to hold off on just a little bit of these because I also think we're getting a little bit into phonics But Barry had asked a question just about children in the district that have a lot of language issues. And I would just say, Barry, that's what phonemic awareness instruction is all about, is it does help build that sound system, which is phonology, which is one aspect of a language system for a student. And so, and then you mentioned students who have autism. So absolutely, if they are, if they're less able to participate in some of the hand motions and things like that, but oftentimes children with autism will repeat what you say. So they absolutely can participate. Video modeling is absolutely something that you could do with students with autism, which is an evidence-based practice for them. So that's something to consider, so that you said that. And then Crystal talked about letter sound stages. And so that's starting to get a little bit into phonics. So we can maybe talk about that at the end, but then you start talking about blending. So I don't know, again, if you're talking about the letters or if you're talking about the phonemic awareness. So you definitely want to use the hand motions for Haggerty, and we are going to talk later too about how manipulatives and other ways to represent are super important. And I see that you use this, the systematic sequential phonics. So right now we're going to shift out of that because I want to stick with phonemic awareness, which is the phonics. So, but I will. We'll come back to that, Crystal, because that's getting a little bit more into the phonics. So, and Crystal, the other thing that we can share with you, because you said how to do things virtually, Jackie and I have a whole document where we go through a ton of tips and tricks for how to actually use and teach phonemic awareness within the virtual setting. So I'm going to link that document in there as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Lindsay.
So,
and thanks for all the great questions and the comments that are coming up in the chat. That's really great. We do want this to not just be us talking at you, but you interacting with us. And so those are some really great questions. And Crystal and Barry, it sounds like some of those things that you're asking, we're going to address as we go through this. So we want to, we'll definitely, as Lindsay said, come back to this and make sure that we address this by the end.
and if we don't, hold us to that, please.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for those of you who don't know, so Candace, thank you for chiming in and helping out with that. Candace, it also works in our office with the state support team, Region 3, and she is a specialist in early childhood. So she helps to support lots of schools and districts in that early childhood. So we're so thrilled that Candace was able to jump on today as well. So we are talking about that tier 1 and tier 2 because we want to focus today on tier 2. So we needed to make sure that we were grounded in that understanding that the core instruction, that tier 1, is included for all students. And it's, so we go through an entire lesson of phonemic awareness skills. We do all 10 skills that go from easiest to more difficult, which would be the bigger sounds to the smaller sounds. And then in tier 2, we include all students who are identified as needing additional support. So how have we identified those students? What assessments have we used? And then we diagnose to make sure that we're going to prescribe exactly what they need so that we are not taking chunks of time that are so valuable out of that core instruction. Again, this tier 2 is going to be on top of what we do in tier 1, and we address those targeted needs specifically. So we want to make sure that we are able to assess and then diagnose to do exactly what each student needs. So we did want to address just really quickly, David Kilpatrick talks about reading compensators. And so we're not going to go really deep into this. One of the resources from David Kilpatrick, oh, you can't see it because of my screen. Oh, if I put it in front of me, then you can see it. So one of the resources that we are addressing, and we're addressing in with the past assessment, is found in this book, Equipped for Reading Success. And in here, David Kilpatrick talks about the reading compensators. So as we look at older students and students who are maybe struggling and having some difficulties, we know that students will compensate in order to hide their difficulties. So even after evaluations, it's often discovered that students have a phonological awareness issue. So that would affect students who, if they are poor spellers, you think that they are readers and they are mediocre readers. And there's, lots of times people will address that fluency or that comprehension. But when you look into their writing and you see that their spelling is being affected, that their poor spelling will drag down their writing expression. So you have those students who you give them a book, you give them a passage, and they'll read, but you ask them to write, and then they won't write things. Oftentimes it's because phonological awareness is at the heart of that issue, but they've compensated in other ways. And sometimes students who are a behavior problem will then get assessed and find out that phonological awareness, or one of those early literacy skills, is really holding them back. And what they're doing is really acting out in order to hide those issues and hide those problems. So we want to be aware of those reading compensators that we will often find. Really in second grade and above, you can find those reading compensators.
I would just also like to add that on the flip side of that, you want to think about those students who may have advanced skills, because you may see some of the same behaviors. If we are reteaching them something that they are very competent with, then they will obviously be easily distracted, not being able to hold their attention, and they'll compensate in other ways. So just being aware of the skill level of all our kids is the most important factor in helping them to achieve everything.
Yeah. Oh, I think we lost you for a second there, Candace. All right, so we're going to dive into how to assess those phonological awareness skills.
So there are a couple different options that you have. So we did, like I said, we had the phonological awareness session, and then phonemic awareness session, and then we also just talks exclusively about the Heggerty curriculum in the spring. And so Heggerty does have a number of diagnostic assessments that you can use, just so you know, that are free and available on their website. So you may want to go ahead, Jackie, and see if you can pop, I don't know, or maybe Candace, if you can pop that one in. But we want to share the past assessment with you, because that is from Dr. David Kilpatrick, and Jackie shared the Essentials book. She was talking about that earlier. So this, I'm sorry, not the Essentials book, the Equipped for Reading Success book. This, Dr. Kilpatrick has two books. So this one is one, and then he also has this one. It's called there, you can see it, Essentials of Assessing, Preventing, and Overcoming Reading Difficulties. So we probably should put the links to those books in there. You don't necessarily need the books, but certainly, I don't know if you can see my book here, but it's completely tabbed up. I have used this book over and over and over again. I actually have my own daughter who has dyslexia, and so we've used this book a lot. It's helped me, even understand more about her needs, as well as students that I've worked with in the past. So we do highly recommend this Equipped for Reading Success book. Even if you could get, a couple copies that you could share on a staff or something like that, it's well worth, I think, that I'm not even sure, I was going to say $70, but maybe it's only $50 that it takes. And what's really awesome about it too is there are some 1-minute phonemic awareness activities that actually correspond with the assessment in the back that you could do with students as interventions. So like I said, it not only does it provide so much information and understanding about the science of reading and how phonological and phonemic awareness are critical to that development, but it also gives these other resources. So do you want to go to the next slide? So we need, this is where I had been putting in that document to print. So just if everyone could put a thumbs up, who has that document available that they already printed or that they could print quickly? I just want to kind of see how many. So good. So Sheila's showing hers. Good. It looks like most of you do. Elizabeth, do you have it? Betsy, Nancy, Carly's got it. Good. So it looks like most of you do, because we want to actually give you some practice with this today. So I am going to say it one more time. It's in the chat there if you haven't downloaded that document, because it is just a protocol for the test. But basically, this is an informal diagnostic and it's individually administered, but it's just an assessment tool to provide a point of instruction for students. And his past assessment is certainly not something that you would give to every student. You would give to those few students, like Jackie said, who were flagged on that screening, that universal screening. And then obviously as you're instructing and you're formatively assessing students, you notice that some may have some other needs. And so this then is where you can dive a little bit deeper into those needs, and this can help you figure out how to plan for instruction. So what we would also like you to do, if you'll notice in the chat there is a link to a document. Well, it's a whole folder that has tier 2 resources for phonemic awareness. So go ahead and click on that link. And within there is a link to part of chapter 11 of Dr. Kilpatrick's Equipped for Reading Success book. And this is actually something that's available online, and it gives you all the information that you would need about the assessment. So it talks about how you would, what are the general principles of administration. It talks about what the discontinue rule is, how you score it, how you interpret it. So I'd like everybody to take a second now to go ahead and go get that document. And Jackie's putting it up here, but that is in that folder. And it's essentially the instructions. But I really would like us to take some time to at least read through. We're not going to get all the way through the whole document because it's 9 pages, but I'd like us to just begin, everyone, so you don't need to read page 1, but if we could just maybe read page 93 of that book, 94, 95, 96, we'll see where we get. So I'd like you to kind of take a look through that document. So again, just give me a thumbs up if you are able to get that document. And if you're having trouble, either unmute or put it in the chat and we will help you. So are people finding that okay? Maybe give me a thumbs up or put in the chat, I'm good. I just we want to give everybody a little bit of time to look over that. Yeah, so let us know, Crystal, if you're still having trouble with that. It's just a PDF, so hopefully it'll come up for you. Everybody else doing okay? So I think what we'd like to do at this time, since everyone seems like they've gotten that document up, what we'd like to do is, if we're going to send you into breakout rooms to just discuss in pairs a little bit about that document. If you want to read it on your own, though, you will go ahead and when you get the invitation to join the breakout room, do not accept it. And then you will be able to stay in the main room and take an opportunity to read it on your own. So give me some nonverbal if that seems clear to everyone. So I'm going to send you to breakouts to have a little conversation about that, just what's in it. But if you would prefer to just read it on your own, you will not accept the invitation to the breakout room, and you'll stay in the main room and just do a little reading on your own. Nancy, are you still having difficulty printing the diagnostic? Jackie, I think we're going to bring everyone back together in about 2 minutes, okay? So
Sounds
that's
great.
kind of everyone else's warning as well. I
Sounds
checked
good.
on the breakout room folks, and all right, so hopefully everyone is back in the session. And I saw Barry had a comment here. Barry, did you review the past assessment or did you review the Haggerty assessment? Because they're slightly different. The past, okay. So yeah, so we're gonna go in depth more with that one as well now. So hopefully you had an opportunity to read through, and we're in a second going to listen to Dr. Kilpatrick himself give the past, so you can kind of get a feel for how he does it, and then you'll get an opportunity to score that as well. So let's move on, because hopefully if you have questions from reading this, which you probably do, some of them will be answered. So just know that this assessment does have 10 levels, which are D through M, and you want to make sure that you follow the sample line at the beginning of each level. So you're actually, giving the student an opportunity to kind of get a feel for what it is that they're going to be asked to do. Also, you always want to keep in mind that because this is phonemic awareness, we are not saying letter names, we are only using letter sounds. So in some of the levels, F through M, it will have a letter, but you make sure that you always ask for the sound. You always say the sound and not the letter name. You want to make sure that you complete the sections of the test from level D on, so you're giving the whole assessment. You want to make sure that you administer at a good pace, and you will be able to hear that brisk pace when Dr. Kilpatrick does it. You can provide corrective feedback. So you just basically say to the student the correct answer, but you're not giving a lot of other feedback. You would just give the correct answer and move on. And then what we love about this assessment is that the student actually gets 2 scores. So we're not just rating accuracy here, which is the correct, but we're also looking for automaticity. And we know if you think back to that reading rope in the bottom where the strands are braided, that's the automaticity that we're talking about. Students have to be automatic with these skills so that they can recall them quickly in order to then be able to build and be fluent readers. So if you want to go to the next one, Jackie, thanks. So just keeping in mind that all items are timed. So in order for a student to get an automatic correct response, to get correct for an automatic response, it has to be within 2 seconds. And you actually want to count that down in your head as you're administering the assessment. And then they have to, in order to get an accurate response, that has to be within 5 seconds. So even that accurate response, we're still timing, because we want to, again, we're building the automaticity. That's why this is so important. And then if they answer within 5 seconds, know that they will get the score for the accurate, but they would not get automatic for that score. It's really also important to keep in mind that you are, you know, again, pronouncing things correctly. You'll want to practice giving this assessment before you actually give it to a student, so that you know what you're saying, and you can feel comfortable in being able to administer it. So then again, like I said, everyone starts at level D1. Even for every kindergarten and at-risk first graders, we're going to give every item at levels D and E, and then follow for the discontinue rule. And the discontinue rule is outlined in the document there. For others, if a student is automatic on the first item of D1, then you can skip down to D2. And he does some skipping around. You're going to notice in the audio recording. So I would probably tend to give all the items, but he does do some skipping around. That's kind of up to you. If you're really seeing the student be automatic and progress really well, then you may want to skip up the levels like he's saying here. But that is entirely up to you. I personally would like to give all of them, just to make sure that I'm, you know, make sure I'm assessing and have the student answering the assessment appropriately. But for scoring purposes, you do count the items skipped as automatic. So if you do skip any items because the student is answering them quickly and automatically, then you would just count those as correct and automatic. So then a word about that discontinue rule. So if the combined correct score on 2 levels in a row is 0, 1, or 2 out of 10, then you would stop with the test. So you wouldn't move on to other levels if you receive that score. And then you also consider all the items in the levels beyond that discontinued level as incorrect. So the student wouldn't get credit for any of those things. Sometimes you will see students who have kind of scattered skills here. So, but you do want to follow that discontinue rule, because that's likely where the student's instructional level, where they're having some skill gaps. So if the student only gets 2 items at level I and none at level J, then you would discontinue the test. So you don't have to give all the items if the student isn't progressing into those other levels. So we're going to listen now to Dr. Kilpatrick give the test. The protocol that you have in front of you, you can follow along, but we're just going to listen right now as he gives the assessment.
All right. Ready?
All right, we're going to do a little word game here. Say the word birthday.
Birthday.
Now say birthday, but don't say birth.
Day.
Okay, say number.
Number.
Now say number, but don't say no.
Bird.
Good. Say enter.
Enter.
Now say enter, but don't say n.
Tur.
Say answer.
Answer.
Now say answer, but don't say sir.
Yan.
That's right. Okay, say November.
November.
Now say November, but don't say no.
November.
Say wonderful.
Wonderful.
Now say wonderful, but don't say one.
Wonderful.
Say barbecue.
Barbecue.
Now say barbecue, but don't say bar.
Barbecue.
Good. Say fall.
Fall.
Now say fall, but don't say f.
Fall.
Say sand.
Sand.
Now say sand, but don't say s.
And.
Say chair.
Chair.
Now say chair, but don't say ch.
Air.
Say wood.
Wood.
Now say wood, but instead of w, say g.
Good.
Say make.
Make.
Now say make instead of say oh.
Lake.
Say deep.
Deep.
Now say deep instead of d, say sh.
Sheep.
Great. Say sled.
Sled.
Now say sled, but don't say s. Well, if you say sled and take away the s, you get lead. Sled, lead. See how that works? Say grow.
Grow.
Now say grow, but don't say g. If you say grow and take away the g,
Grow.
what do you get? Grow. Very good. Say glue.
Glue.
Now say glue instead of g. Say b.
Blue.
Say slide.
Slide.
Now say sly instead of say f.
Fly.
Say brick.
Brick.
Now say brick instead of b. Say t.
Tick.
Well, if you say brick and change the b to a t, you get trick. Brick, trick. Okay. Say beam.
Beam.
Now say beam without the m. Beam, and you're going to take away the m. It would be b. Beam, b, because I took away the m. Say plane.
Plane.
Now say plane without the n.
Play.
Good. Say freeze.
Freeze.
Now say freeze, but don't say z.
Tree.
Great. Say card.
Card.
Now say card, but don't say d.
Card.
Say film.
Film.
Now say film without the m.
Hill.
Great. Say sit.
Sit.
Now say sit, but instead of I, say a.
Sat.
Great. Say hid.
Hid.
Now say hid instead of I, say a.
Hid.
It would be had. Hid, had, because you changed the I to a. Say fix.
Fix.
Now say fix instead of I, say a.
Box.
Great. Say lane.
Lane.
Now say lane instead of a, say I. If you say lane and change the a to I, line. Lane, line, because you changed a to I. Say phone.
Phone.
Now say phone instead of o, say I.
Fin.
Fine. Phone, fine, because you changed the o to I. Say plan.
Plan.
Now say plan without the o.
Land.
If you say plan and take away the o, you get pan. Plan, pan. Say sneak.
Sneak.
Now say sneak without the n.
Eat.
Well, if you say sneak and take away the n, you get seek. Sneak, seek. Say sweep.
Sweep.
Now say sweep instead of w. Say o. Sweep, and you're going to change the w to a o. You get
Sweep.
sleep. Very good. Say flute.
Flute.
Now say flute instead of o. Say r.
Loop.
It's fruit. Flute, fruit, because you changed the o to r. Guess what? We're done. You did a great job. Thank you very much.
So hopefully you noticed a few things, his pacing with it. You also noticed how he provided the corrective feedback. He didn't go on and on, but he said it very quickly and moved on. And you noticed how he presented the items. So what we'd like you to do now is go to page 98 of that chapter 11 document. And I just want you to reference this as I talk about it. So Jackie, if you want to go to the next slide. Sorry. So, and then go to the one after that. So at the top of page 98, you'll see that the passing a level and the item scoring is listed there just for your reference, but we also have it here in a little bit different format. But if a student says an incorrect score, you're going to mark it with a 0. If they have a correct score, or the item is correct, then you're going to use a check mark. And if they get it automatic, then you're going to add a plus to that. So that's how the scoring looks. So then when you're not going to add it up until you're all the way finished, but when you get to the end of a section, there will be a place for you to both talk about the correct and the automatic. So you will count up all the corrects, which are the check marks, and then count up all of the pluses with the automatics. And then you get both a correct accuracy score and you also get an automaticity score. And so if a student is considered to be proficient or pass a particular level, they would have to get 4 out of 5 answered, and not just with the accuracy, but they would need that automaticity score. So they would have to have that plus. So, and if they have 3 or fewer, then it's not considered passing. So thinking about that, you may have students who are getting them correct, but they are still slow. And so there could still be lingering challenges with their phonemic awareness skills if they're not able to automatically do the answer the questions. So just kind of keeping that in mind. So are there any questions about the scoring and how you do that, or the administration right now? Because what we would like you to do is take the opportunity now to listen to that again, and you're going to use that form that I believe most of you have, and you're going to actually listen to David give the test again, and you're going to do the scoring. So this is a practice scoring time. So does anyone have any questions, either that you want to put in the chat or you want to unmute and ask? But we're going to give you an opportunity to practice with the recording now. So everybody get their form out and get that ready. So give me a thumbs up if you've got your form ready. Or say I'm good in chat. I see some people holding it up. That works too. Okay, it looks like we've got, folks are ready to go. So do you want to roll that again? Jackie, thank you.
Yep, here we go.
All right, we're going to do a little word game here. Say the word birthday.
Birthday.
Now say birthday, but don't say birth.
Day.
Okay, say number.
Number.
Now say number, but don't say no.
Birth.
Good. Say enter.
Enter.
Now say enter, but don't say n.
Sure.
Say answer.
Answer.
Now say answer, but don't say sir.
Yan.
That's right. Okay, say November.
November.
Now say November, but don't say no.
November.
Say wonderful.
Wonderful.
Now say wonderful, but don't say one.
Wonderful.
Say barbecue.
Barbecue.
Now say barbecue, but don't say bar.
Barbecue.
Good. Say fall.
Fall.
Now say fall, but don't say f.
Fall.
Say sand.
Sand.
Now say sand, but don't say s.
And.
Say chair.
Chair.
Now say chair, but don't say ch.
Air.
Say wood.
Wood.
Now say wood, but instead of w, say g.
Good.
Say make.
Make.
Now say make instead of say oh.
Lake.
Say deep.
Deep.
Now say deep instead of d, say sh.
Sheep.
Great. Say sled.
Sled.
Now say sled, but don't say s.
And.
Well, if you say sled and take away the s, you get lead. Sled, lead. See how that works? Say grow.
Grow.
Now say grow, but don't say g. If you say grow and take away the g,
Grow.
what do you get? Grow. Very good. Say glue.
Glue.
Now say glue instead of g, say b.
Blue.
Say slide.
Slide.
Now say slide instead of say f.
Fly.
Say brick.
Brick.
Now say brick instead of b, say t.
Tick.
Well, if you say brick and change the b to a t, you get trick. Brick, trick. Okay. Say beam.
Beam.
Now say beam without the mm. Beam, and you're going to take away the mm. It would be B. Beam, B, because I took away the mm. Say plane.
Plane.
Now say plane without the n.
Play.
Good. Say freeze.
Freeze.
Now say freeze, but don't say z.
Tree.
Great. Say card.
Card.
Now say card, but don't say d.
Card.
Say film.
Film.
Now say film without the mm.
Hill.
Great. Say sit.
Sit.
Now say sit, but instead of I, say ah.
Sat.
Great. Say hid.
Hid.
Now say hid instead of I, say ah.
Hid.
It would be had. Hid, had, because you changed the I to ah. Say fix.
Fix.
Now say fix instead of I, say ah. Great. Say lane.
Lane.
Now say lane instead of A, say I. If you say lane and change the A to I, line, lane, line, because you changed A to I. Say phone.
Phone.
Now say phone instead of O, say I.
Fin.
Fine, phone, fine, because you changed the O to I. Say plan.
Plan.
Now say plan without the O.
Land.
If you say plan and take away the O, you get pan. Plan, pan. Say sneak.
Sneak.
Now say sneak without the N.
Seek.
Well, if you say sneak and take away the N, you get seek. Sneak, seek. Say sweep.
Sweep.
Now say sweep instead of say lo. Sweep, and you're going to change the W to a lo. You get
Sleep.
sleep. Very good. Say flute.
Flute.
Now say flute instead of lo. Say rrr.
Loop.
It's fruit. Flute, fruit, because you changed the lo to rrr. Guess what? We're done. You did a great job. Thank you very much.
All right, how did everyone do? I know in my one group, there's some people that have already given this, so you may already be familiar with that, but hopefully this gave you a little opportunity to practice. So what you would do, Jackie, if you'll go to the next slide there. So what you would do then, no, go back one. We're gonna not have time to practice. So what you would do though is then you would again add up what were your correct or your accuracy scores, and then you would also add up the automatic column, and then you would put the totals at the bottom of each one of those sections, and then you would transfer those score totals to the first page of the test. So and you want to really think, you know, where are we with those, both automatic and the accuracy, and kind of see where the student is doing. So anyone want to unmute or put anything in the chat? How did that go for people?
I want to ask a question. This is Nancy Roach.
Yes.
So there were a couple times where he gave corrective feedback and then the child got it right. So I wasn't sure if it would be counted as correct but not fluent, or would it be counted as incorrect because it took him more than 5 seconds. So there were just a couple gray areas for me on 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah, so if he gave corrective feedback, it's not counted as correct.
Okay, I just was making sure.
Yeah, and he would also miss it, like you said, because he didn't have the accuracy within the 5 seconds.
Okay, I was just clarifying.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So
Thanks.
Yeah, that's a good question. Plus the other question that often comes up on this one is that he took the opportunity to, what was I going to say? Oh, some of them he skipped at the very beginning. And so I think that can sometimes be confusing. And remember, if you skip an item because you feel like the student is going to be fine with that skill, then they would be both accurate and automatic. So that would just count as correct for that person. So keeping that in mind. But thank you for that question. Sheila says she needs to practice again. So we're kind of at a point here. We only have a few minutes left in this session for the actual part that we were going to do. However, we did leave this open to 11. So I know that some people might have to leave at 10:30, but I think we're going to skip over the opportunity to practice in this session, but we could come back to that if anyone wanted to stay from 10:30 to 11. But what we were going to do is break you into groups and have you practice again. And you're absolutely right. So if you have to leave at 10:30, you will absolutely want to recruit some people to help you practice this assessment, because you can't just give it one time and know what you're doing. And it does take some time to get used to it. Jackie, if you would skip to slide 40, please, just really quickly.
I'm sorry, I went way too far.
That's okay. So this just gives somewhat of a guide to interpreting the results. I don't want you to get hung up in the grade levels. I do want you to kind of pay attention to where typically achieving readers would be in terms of what skills they would have mastered. But remember that this assessment is a guide for you to plan instruction. So what's more important is what skills does the student have? What skills do they not have? You can kind of gauge with the grade level, but I definitely don't want you to get hung up on, oh, it's a late first grade or a late, because that doesn't give you any information about what you're teaching next. And so what you need to do is really look at what are the skills that are in those levels, which they're all labeled, and then you can begin to think about that instructional plan. And Jackie's going to talk to us about that for the remainder of our time. Will the slides be available, Nancy? Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so we wanted to make sure that we're addressing the needs of doing this assessment in a remote environment, because lots of you are in this environment right now. So when we're talking about assessing in a remote environment, we're really including also those universal screeners as well. So you can kind of take this and apply it to those situations as well. So we want to make sure that we have what we need set up in the environment. So does the student have the computer or tablet with the sound available? Are they able to hear you clearly when you're giving this assessment? But when we think about this in a home environment, so if you're talking about the universal screener, you may need to screen share or think about sending those paper materials home with them. But we think it's okay to do that screen share as well. But that sound really needs to be crystal clear. So thinking about your sound to them, not only just hearing you hearing them, but how are they hearing you? So testing out that sound, a great way to do that, and we have that in those resources that Lindsay was talking about as well, is testing different modes of sound and recording yourself with those different modes of sound and hearing how well can you hear yourself. But another consideration that we need to think about is that parent or caregiver role. So we want to make sure that we're getting an accurate assessment. So you want to be able to alert parents to the fact that you're going to be doing an assessment with the student. So you want them to be in a quiet place that's as distraction-free as possible, but you don't want a caregiver to be prompting them or interrupting or helping the student during the assessment, because you just want to explain to the parents that this is going to help you make sure that each student is getting the accurate instruction that they need. So you want to be able to meet them where they're at and just encourage the students to really do their best during the assessment. So talking about, in this remote environment, you want to be able to still get useful data. So you want to have those considerations that we just talked about, and you want to review in both your universal screeners and any assessment that you're going to give, what are approved accommodations. So we know that AimsWeb and Acadians and Dibbles, they have those approved accommodations for students, larger print for students with visual impairments and those types of things. But you don't want to use accommodations that are not approved and that may impact the results that you're going to get. So just because they're in a remote environment, you don't want to give too many cues. You want to make sure that you're reading through those descriptions and the guidelines, and you're administering it, or the person who is administering it is trained to do so with fidelity. So giving the past, having this time to practice is really important. So if you have any, if you have access to, your own children at home, I know all of mine have had to take the past assessment to help me practice. I've, used some neighbors in this remote environment. So, how can we get people to practice this before you give it to a student online? So I've even had my children, like, hey, go upstairs and I'm going to Zoom call you. And so I can see if there's delays in their responses to me, so that I'm not really deducting from that automaticity if it's really a sound delay. So you would still count that 2 seconds, but then if you can hear the sound at that 2 seconds, then you would make sure that you're marking that correctly. So it's really, you want to make sure that we're going to pre-correct things in the environment before we assess, giving notice to those caregivers, the parents. Maybe they're in a babysitting situation at, some students are at the YMCA, but giving that advance notice so they're not giving that extra support. Did I skip one? There we go. Okay, so the biggest difference we're talking about after we assess, how do we create that instructional plan? So what are we going to do in tier 1 and what are we doing in tier 2? So it's that, what we talked about at the beginning, that on top of. So we're not replacing tier 1, that whole group instruction, with one-on-one or with a small group. We want to make sure that we're layering that on top of. We can also make sure we're using some multisensory opportunities, students to be able to have Alconin boxes if they need those, or slinkies in order to stretch out words, sliders, bingo chips, colored cards that they can point to on the screen. I know it's hard to see, it keeps going in and out, so that they can point to different syllables or words or sounds that they hear, allowing them to have those manipulatives, but that in the learning. But in the assessment, they shouldn't be using those types of multisensory opportunities, because we want to make sure that they are at that automatic level and they're not using those additional supports in order to do that. We want to make sure that we're able to get students to that mapping of the sounds. So are they able to really dive into those phonological awareness skills and develop along that continuum from rhyming to segmenting? Lindsay had talked about those 1-minute activities, which are really great, especially for after we give an assessment like this, where we can really target and dive into those specific phonological awareness skills or phonemic awareness. So having those results to determine where we dive into that intervention with students is really important, so that we're not overdoing it. We don't want to just double dose and give them the same exact thing that we gave them before, but we want to target where we're going with something. So a 1-minute activity, or starting where they need to build automaticity and building from there, is really important. And then we want to make sure we monitor progress. So in curriculum-based measures, such as Ames Web, Acadience, and Dibbles, they do have those measures that would include phonological awareness, such as that first sound fluency or phoneme segmentation. But you can just simply give something like a 1-minute activity, or give them 5 items from where the student is losing that automaticity. So they may have some things correct, but they're not automatic at that level. And on a bi-weekly basis, or even a weekly basis, depending on the student and where they are at, giving them just 5 items and going through some of these things like substitution or deletion or rhyming, and looking for that automaticity. Are they able to build up that automaticity and bring clarity into those certain skills? So again, just referencing, where do you find those 1-minute activities if you're looking for them? This Equipped for Reading Success book I also put a link to that. As Lindsay was talking, I was making sure I was getting you the best deal on this. So if this is something you're looking for, we're not saying, you know, you have to go out and purchase this, but this book is really valuable. And as Lindsay said, you know, you're going to use it over and over again, but you will find those 1-minute activities in the David Kilpatrick book, Equipped for Reading Success. But you can also, if you're using Haggerty, you can target that skill in the Haggerty curriculum, and you can use those skills along that progression. And also, as you're doing those interventions, using those multisensory activities to help support. So we want to make sure that, you know, as we're talking about beyond Tier 1 instruction, that you're only using Haggerty or whatever phonemic awareness curriculum, and that's it. So you can build this into your day, throughout your day. So if you're using a phonics program that also gives that couple minutes of phonological awareness at the beginning and kind of primes the pump for them to start their phonics lesson, we don't want to lose that time. So someone was talking about, how do I, you know, line up these different curriculums or these different resources in order to make them all align? That's really difficult to do. So if you're using Haggerty, use that continuum that Haggerty suggests and go through those lessons from easier to more complex. Don't skip those skills. But then when you get into something like foundations or any type of phonics program, if they do prime that pump with a couple minutes of phonological awareness, it's going to prime them for what you're about to do in that lesson. So you don't want to, it doesn't have to be exactly connected. It's those skills and giving them more awareness of those skills as you go throughout the day. You can also address phonological awareness skills as you're teaching new vocabulary. Manipulate the sounds in the vocabulary words that you're doing. All these opportunities, whenever you're talking about new words or sounds or bringing in that phonological processor and connecting it to the orthographic processor, making those connections really apparent for students is really going to be important, not only in the primary grades, but in the older grades as well, as they get into more complex words.
Well, you bring up such a good point, Jackie, because when you think about the multisyllabic words that students have to decode at the older grades, and if you take some of those Tier 2 and especially Tier 3 words and you're breaking them up into syllables, and you know, kids are learn about syllable types and things like that, you know, that's another great way too. So before we close out, Nancy had a question, so I just wanted to make sure we addressed it. So I'll say it out loud, but when we use a sound tapping tool, so I'm assuming you were talking about the felt board that Jackie was showing during instruction. If it is hard for students to see the tool we are holding up, could we share it on their screen instead? So I know you've been doing a lot of thinking through this virtual remote learning, so I figured you probably had a good response for her. So
yeah, so Nancy, that's a great question. So when we have the tool in front of us, that's one thing, right? And we can show this as an example. And of course, when I'm using a virtual background, it's really difficult because then you can see it goes in and out. So, but we want them to be able to have it and for them to be able to slide it. So even if we provided them with directions and said, you know what, I want you to cut out 3 squares and color the squares first, obviously, and then cut them out so that they can slide them or they can tap them, or even providing them, you know, just say, hey, take a piece of paper and draw this. They might not always have access to print something if you send it to them, but if they had a piece of paper and they drew it on a piece of paper and followed your example and then colored it so they can tap in front of them would be really important. And then for you to show it how you're doing it, then they kind of pick up on that really quick. But that use of multisensory things would be really important for them to have in front of them. Ask them if they have a Slinky, you know, they might not. But so how can we, you know, create that multisensory opportunity in their environment, and then you're showing it in your environment. Does that help? And Nancy, feel free to unmute. Or anybody.
Yeah, I put my answer in the chat. Okay, great. Paper works.
Yeah.
Post-it notes.
Right. Yeah. Post-it note, anything that they can slide around. You know, ask them if they have a game, you know, that has game pieces, that they could bring a couple game pieces in front of them. You know, we know most of their games are, you know, on an iPad or on a phone or something. But just ask them, you know, hey, tomorrow, I want you to look after we're done and see if you have any games that have little pieces. And I want you to bring 3 different pieces with you so they can slide those and make it more fun.
I want to make sure that we close out. We did have a couple participants who had to leave early. So I am going to put the session feedback link in here just so, because that will give you your certificate of participation. Jackie's going to show that slide. We do have some more questions and we will stay on till 11, but I just wanted to make sure that if anybody has to go, since we were a few minutes late, that you are welcome to, you know, to do that feedback. So the link is in there now in the chat. But we had a great question from Crystal here. So Crystal, did you want to unmute and talk, or do you want me to read it?
Oh, either way. So when I first started like Haggerty, which was about a year and a half ago now, all the trainings that I first went to kind of focused on like just talking and listening, and they like flat out said, don't use any worksheets for practice, don't use visuals, don't use anything other than you know, having kids listen to sounds, you're talking, they're talking, that's it. The hand motions and talking, like that's all you need. I've supplemented just as needed, just because of the population of kids that I teach, I had to. But are we now saying that it's fine, we can use all of those things?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Crystal. And I think that that needs some clarification, because so one of the things, when you say worksheets, obviously we were talking about a piece of paper to color and use boxes, but we want to remember we're talking about phonological awareness skills. So that is all oral and sound. So we don't want to bring anything in that's going to incorporate writing or that orthographic. Letters. So anything, right, anything that would have the letter on it, pointing to the letter, manipulating letters, those things, then we would be getting into that phonics realm, when we want to make sure that we keep this time really sacred into that phonological awareness realm under that umbrella. So any manipulatives, like the one that I'm showing with the colors, is not giving them any cues to that orthographic symbol or those letters. So it's just, you know, first or the middle sound or the ending sound, or, you know, sliding them up if they were breaking apart a word and it's k, a, t. And so just be able to manipulate or visually see how things are broken up into chunks. That is absolutely acceptable. And even the trainers from that Haggerty resource will also say that, and they will talk about bringing in those manipulatives. Lindsay, did you have more to add to that, or?
Yeah, I did. I think you also just keep in mind that you're likely not going to use manipulatives when you're doing that tier 1 Haggerty lesson, but this is where we now get into tier 2 and maybe even into tier 3. We, you know, kind of focused tier 2 today, but you're absolutely going to have students that are going to need that intensification of that intervention. So that, or of that, you know, so an intensification example would be use of manipulative. So you don't want to mess around with them too much in your 10 to 12 minute whole group lesson, because frankly, you know, kids are doing things with them and it's kind of all over the place. That's why they have the hand motions to keep kids actively engaged. But you may have some students, as you're working with them in small groups, that are going to need various types of manipulatives to be able to really understand it. I'll never forget teaching the onset and rhyme to students, and it's like, didn't matter how many different ways you did it, they just weren't understanding that. And so, one of the things for onset and rhyme that we have are actually, if, I don't know, Jackie, if you can show the slide on 51, because it sort of looks like that, so you have two parts of a, are you able to go back up?
That's slide 51.
Yeah, so you would have the negative part of that would fit together, so you could show the onset and the rhyme, and and flip out the different onsets, for example. But some students need that visually, but you wouldn't be doing those things in tier 1 because you don't have time, and it's extraneous things.
Yeah. So Lindsay, you were talking about the blue symbol there, right?
Yes.
And using, you can use a visual, like a picture of a bus, right? And then cut the bus into two parts where then they can see us, but it's not, the word bus is not on there. It's the picture, like a picture puzzle that would help that visual of breaking up the beginning sound and the rhyme of that sound, the onset and rhyme.
And there are some commercially available things like that, but also you can make your own. So I don't know if you work with students who definitely need those extra visual supports, you absolutely can include, those kinds of things. Some students even need, if we start to maybe even get into tier 3, need objects. So, they might be taking, I'm trying to think of a 2-syllable word that would have an easy object. Butterfly, for example, and so they might have the butterfly image, or not the image, but the actual, an actual 3D object of the butterfly, and then we would have 2 unifix cubes, so that we would match, that's got 2 syllables, and I'm matching that to the 2. So there's lots of things like that where you can also set students up for really that errorless learning. So I was going to see if, I don't know if some of the visuals that I'm going to try to pull up that previous presentation. We just didn't have time to go through all of that stuff, but I was going to see if I can pull up that previous presentation with some of those visuals of some of those materials. So I'm going to look for that really quickly here.
Is the previous presentation, Jackie, in our teacher toolkit? Was that one of the PDs that you're referring to?
So Lindsay's talking about where we talked about the tier 1 phonological awareness, and we really went through it. Lindsay, that's the one you're talking about, right? Where
I am, but we really didn't touch on that. Even that would have been we did a Haggerty in the spring, but this would have been winter and last fall. So yeah, you don't have access to this, but we could pull some of the slides out if you wanted to have access to some of those. Let's see if I can get it to load here. Because we do have a whole literacy series that we run, and this year it's going to be, I think the sessions are going to be on demand from what I understand. So you would be able to view those at different times. Yeah. But Jackie and I did a session in the spring that was exclusively focused on using Haggerty because so many people were using it. And it came out of us doing another session about phonological and phonemic awareness where people said, can we just have a session on Haggerty? And we said, sure. So, and then there were a lot of questions about, well, how do you use Haggerty in tier 2? So that's where this one came from. So it's kind of been a progression of us.
Let me put the link that's not the link to our website.
So I'm going to see if I can find some of these. Do you want to, Jackie, do you want to or stop sharing? And I'm going to see if I can,
yeah, I can do that.
Start sharing. Actually, this one doesn't have it. Let's see. This one might.
While Lindsay's taking a look for that, is there someone has other questions?
This one has some.
I have something I just want to comment to Crystal because I didn't want to muddy the waters earlier. when I made the comment about systematic sequential phonics, but she asked, how do you move kids when they learn the letters and the sounds and then they get stuck? I think that was her question. I could be wrong. And I was just making a comment that I love systematic sequential phonics for that reason, because it pushes the kids forward no matter where they are in their learning already. It pushes them forward. If they don't know letters, they learn letters. If they don't know sounds, they learn their sounds. If they don't know how to blend, they learn to blend. So I was just doing a plug for that particular system because it has worked wonders for my class. But I'm struggling to figure out how to do it virtually, but I was just answering her question. I didn't mean to muddy the waters. I know that's not our topic today.
No. We appreciate it. And, you know, sharing of resources is really great. So, the systematic sequential phonics, obviously, you know, we weren't talking about phonics, but it's that helping that. So it's really critical to make sure that they're working on phonological awareness skills, that whole continuum of skills, but also then connecting it once you get into phonics. So it can't live all by itself. And so what Nancy's talking about with using the systematic sequential phonics and or a program like Foundations or any other phonics program is building that together. So you have that time to do phonological awareness, and then you have time to do phonics, and you help students make those connections in whichever programs you're using. That's what's going to help them map those things together and make those connections and move beyond, is when you are explicit about how those sounds then map onto those letters after you've done that phonological awareness program. I did put a link. Oh, first of all, Crystal, did that help answer your question? Or I see you're shaking your head. Yes. Feel free to unmute. We're a small group that's still left. But I did link in the chat our SST literacy page, which has the recording of, we went really in depth in that core instruction for phonological awareness. And then we really went into a training for Haggerty. So if you're looking for more in-depth training on using that Haggerty resource, that is available to you on that website as well as lots of other resources on our SST3 homepage for literacy.
So I found something, and we'll just kind of, if you remember, I don't know if you remember the umbrella continuum that Jackie shared in the first section. And so we do have this presentation that has some resources that are pictured that we can absolutely, we'll cut the beginning part of it, but put this up. So if you're looking for some things, this would be some considerations, but this is broken into the early phonological awareness activities, and then what's the middle one, Jackie? Why can't I think of it right now? Basic. Yeah, basic. Thank you. And advanced. And so this would give you some ideas. So ways for, you know, students to be able to do things like repeating sentences, clapping words and sentences, counting words. So these are those very, very early skills. A lot of these,
where they're not seeing those so when you're talking about that, they're manipulating those chips.
Right.
And they're saying the sentence.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of these you might not use manipulatives for, but you could. So some of this, again, you're just saying things, you know, obviously you can use clapping, but here's some other examples of things for syllables using sticks, tapping it out. There's a way to, if you put your elbow on a table, then you can feel, you know, students can feel their jaw drop every time. The duck lips method, where they pinch their lips, and obviously every time a syllable, it opens because, you know, syllables are open, or I'm sorry, vowels are open sounds, so their mouth would open for that. So we'll share this. There's some examples. This would be a very, very much something that would be hands-on, the student putting the animal into the cage that matches the number of syllables that they have. So these are some examples of things that you could do within your, in your intervention sessions as well. So you would use that information from the past, and then you could enter into some of these activities. So I think I posted this one, but you could, have the students actually use their fists to stomp. Some teachers have even used Play-Doh balls, and they would stomp the Play-Doh balls. Felt. So here's some examples: the bingo dabbers. You can do clip up things. So here's what Jackie was talking about earlier. Although she was talking with the onset and rhyme, but if you just have some images, you could cut them into onset and rhyme. You could cut them into syllables. You could also cut different ones into 2, 3, and 4, even 5 phonemes. If you wanted to get, fancy there, you can do, grab bags, syllable sorts. So there's lots of different things. Some of this stuff is available commercially, but you also could do that. And then, there's a lot of syllable deletion kinds of activities. So if you, have one picture, you take a part away. So those kinds of things. These are some of those early. Don't forget about our alliteration books that we can read that help students. So we'll share this with you because there might be some things that you, here's the cards for the onset and the rhyme. Rhyming, you can use pictures. And then this is what I was saying earlier, teaching rhyming. So you can have students have these manipulatives to be able to match up the rhymes. And obviously as that onset changes, then the color changes so that the student gets that visual that beginning sound is changing. So would this be helpful to you guys to have access to, just to look through for some ideas? So there's, like I said, there's lots of stuff in here. And then we were talking about a few of these, but you can have beads on a shoestring, Unifix cube, foam pieces, magnetic chips. This stuff is probably going to be when you're in your classroom, when you're in your classrooms. But again, we kind of talked about, what are those sources we can use to punt when we need to, when we're in online environments. So, but we will cut the first part of this out and put that also in that tier 2 folder. So that has been listed in the chat a bunch of different times. I know some people also had to leave, so I'm going to make sure that we send an email with all the links to everyone that was on the call, so you can also get that. So I don't want to keep going here with this because I want to make sure if there's any other questions that you have them, that you get them answered. So are there anybody that wants to? I think I need to stop sharing.
And I know some people had said that, and I think it was maybe Sheila who had said that you wanted to practice more of the past. In that folder, I dropped the audio of David Kilpatrick doing the past assessment. So if you want to pull up that audio and use your screening document to go through and kind of practice that as well.
And the other thing that I don't think we said is that there are multiple forms that are available of the past assessment, and we linked those also in that folder for you. So if you did want to use the past for progress monitoring, you'd have multiple copies of it that you could use it with students, and it wouldn't, the items are different, obviously. So.
Any other questions that you might want to have addressed?
We really appreciate you all being here today. Thank you so much.
Yes. And I think Lindsay had also mentioned that the recording of this will go onto that the website, the SST literacy website, when we have it, it will be loaded there. So people can, if you know people who weren't able to make it today, or you want to review the presentation, you're welcome to go back onto our website and check that out.
I think we're good. So thanks, Nancy, for 2 thumbs up. We appreciate it. We
Thank
appreciate the
you.
questions and you all hanging in with for the Q&A. And again, well, you'll have our emails in when we send the email, but please feel free if you have any questions to just reach out. So thanks so much again. All right, take care.
Thank you for joining us. It was nice to see everyone.
Now it's choose for Olivia.